On the show today, I have Jill Michaelson and Chelsea Siebenaler. They're from Kaizen Educational Group right here in Perrysburg, and they help children with learning differences. Welcome to the Perrysburg Podcast, episode 141. I'm your host, Perrysburg resident Kim Newlove. The Perrysburg Podcast is a resource for Perrysburg residents. We talk about what's in Perrysburg and why people like to live here. Our website is perrysburgpodcast.com. As we get started, I would like to read a disclaimer. I did this for the medical series in 2025. I think it's appropriate here. So here's a disclaimer. The information shared in this episode is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any learning differences, disabilities, or mental health conditions, nor does it replace advice, diagnosis, or treatment from a qualified professional. Every child is unique. If you have concerns about your child's development, learning, or behavior, please consult with a licensed healthcare provider, educational professional, or other qualified specialist who can evaluate your child's individual needs. Kaizen Educational Group is a business here in Perrysburg, and they are located at 741 Commerce Drive, Suite 300. Their website is kaizeneducationalgroup.com. Kaizen is spelled Kaizen, kaizeneducationalgroup.com. The information and opinions provided by Jill and Chelsea are their own. And that ends the disclaimer. That's the serious part of this episode. Now, before we get to the interview, I want to point out that throughout the interview with Jill and Chelsea, I bring in some personal information about me. I mention my experience as a parent of a child with autism. My son's name is Craig, and he is now 23 years old. He has graduated from Perrysburg schools, and he's into the adult services category. You have to start somewhere, so back in the day, Craig started his educational journey with Lucas County Early Intervention Services and Toledo Public Schools in 2005. When I started this podcast, I introduced myself and the fact that we were looking for a house in Perrysburg in 2006, and we actually moved here in 2007. So when we moved to Perrysburg in 2007, we enrolled Craig in Perrysburg schools. We started off with an IEP with Perrysburg schools because he was still in his third year of preschool at Capable Kids in Toledo. So that's a little bit about my son and our experience from diagnosis until now. And I would also like to say as a disclaimer that Craig had some excellent providers over the years. We had private pay providers and the school provided providers. Thank you very much to everybody, the village that has helped us raise our son Craig. My husband and I thank you. But with that said, back in 2005, we could have really used some coaching, advocacy, and perspective from an all-in-one business like Kaizen Educational Group. We did the best we could with the information we had, but getting a diagnosis and knowing what to do with that information was confusing and stressful. The internet was not then what it is now, and finding information and support was a challenge. When you're new to something and you're already in the thick of it, it can feel like being in a container and trying to read the label when you're inside the jar. You just don't have the perspective you need. And learning all the things that you really need can feel like drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of distractions and misinformation and disinformation out there. So as you listen to today's interview, I want you to imagine how a resource like Kaizen Educational Group could have helped a family like mine make sense of a very overwhelming time in our lives. This episode, I promise you, has a positive, helpful, upbeat vibe. If you or someone you know has learning differences and you need support, you need to listen to this episode. We talk about what Kaizen Educational Group is, services they provide, diagnoses or learning differences that they see most often, the evaluation process, how they give information to parents to process, a story about a child they helped, upcoming summer programs, contact information, and more. That's just the short list. They stick in all kinds of pearls of wisdom as we talk. So without further ado, I know that was a long introduction, but here is my conversation with Jill and Chelsea. Jill and Chelsea, welcome to the Perrysburg podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's good to have you with me today. At this time, let's do introductions. Jill, I'll have you go first.
Yeah, I'm Jill Michaelson. I'm one of the co-owners of Kaizen Educational Group located in Perrysburg.
And I'm Chelsea Siebenaler. I'm the other co-owner of Kaizen Educational Group.
Thank you for the introductions. Are you both Perrysburg residents?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. Township or city, Jill?
City.
Okay, and Chelsea?
City.
Nice. Jill, let's go to you first. For listeners who are hearing about Kaizen Educational Group for the first time, what do you do and who do you help?
Kaizen Educational Group is located in Perrysburg, and we're a private practice. And we have a multidisciplinary team of exceptional people. We have school psychologists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, educators, intervention specialists, mental health counselors, advocates. And what we do is we complete psychoeducational evaluations for children, usually about 2.5 to 18, and sometimes adults, depending on need. We provide private therapies, tutoring, and advocacy support for families. Ultimately, what we like to say that we do is serve our community. What we like is that we can provide guidance to families, offer recommendations, kind of point them in the right direction and provide them action steps on what they can do to support their child.
Thank you. That is a lot. I didn't know that all that could be in one company here in Perrysburg. So I'm so glad that we have met and you are talking about this with me today. And Chelsea, anything to add?
I would add to that we're a business that is exactly a place where we offer all of those comprehensive services. It doesn't exist in Northwest Ohio, and it was important to us to be able to provide all of those supports and services under one roof so that parents feel like they have access to all of that in just one setting.
Well said. As a parent of a now adult with autism, I wish something like this existed. When my son, Craig, was diagnosed with autism in the year 2005, we had to kind of piece things together with ABA at this place and, diagnostic services at the University of Michigan, and then speech and OT at Rehab Dynamics, and then early intervention. We lived in Lucas County at the time. So anyways, just to have somebody who knew the role of all the therapists and had them all in the same building would have been really nice. And like I said, I didn't know this existed, so I'm so glad we're talking about this today.
Us too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
At this time, Jill, I'd like to know what kinds of diagnoses or learning differences does Kaizen Educational Group commonly work with?
There's quite a few, but I'm happy to share with you some of the more common ones that we see. We often see children that have ADHD, which often has a comorbidity to other things. So we'll often find children have weaknesses with executive functioning and need support in that area, or adaptive behavior. Autism is pretty common. And again, when we're supporting a child that has autism, we often know that they may need support in sensory processing or pragmatics like that social language, emotional regulation. We provide support to children that have dyslexia, so that structured reading instruction. Occupational therapists, so we're looking at fine motor, visual perception, emotional regulation support that might be there. I think overall we see children with varying amount of amazing strengths, and we like to capitalize on that and we like to celebrate that. But we certainly see quite a variety of children that have learning differences. And here we really try to pinpoint what those are and then tailor a plan for them that also focuses on action steps as well as their strengths and areas of need.
There's a wide range, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
I think the only term that I'm not super familiar with was the executive function. Is that the ability to form a plan and follow it, or what is that?
So executive functioning is the ability to plan and organize. It takes into account how you're able to regulate cognition, how you're able to regulate emotions, and essentially how you're able to look at your life, whether it's day to day or even just project at a time. Are you able to initiate that? Are you able to develop a plan to complete that task and then follow through with that task?
You just named a few of my strengths. I can only imagine how frustrating that would be to not be able to come up with a plan, figure out the steps to accomplish it, and be responsible enough to follow through with it. So, yeah, thank you for talking about what executive function is. You work with children ages 2.5 to 18. So, as a young person, as a young learner, what does that look like? How would a parent maybe figure out, oh, my child has a problem with executive function?
I would ask them to think about their morning routine. What does that look like for their child? You may be having to give several reminders throughout that morning time of getting up, getting dressed, brush your teeth, brush your hair, pack your book bag, get your shoes on. You may be finding yourself breaking down each of those steps over and over or giving multiple reminders. And it may be challenging for your child to do that independently or to be able to follow through with that on a regular basis, even though it's a routine thing you're doing in your home 5 days out of the week.
And you're saying that you're able to help somebody improve from that baseline of needing the reminders and other supports to maybe being independent or more independent. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. We're looking at being able to provide practical strategies for families and children. So, being able to break down a task that as an adult you may be able to independently do, but for them, it takes some extra steps or takes some extra reminders and giving them the strategies to be able to build that capacity for themselves and be more independent with it.
Well, that's all good news. Do you work with husbands by any chance? There's a few things in my kitchen my husband cannot remember where they go. And he sees the thing and he just waits for me to put it away. But sorry, that's a whole nother problem. I think even when we have a problem as a young learner with executive function, I think there's a certain amount of not being able to do certain things. That's normal, but I can tell that when it comes to education, if there's somebody who has a morning routine and they're just really struggling with it, you can tell that they're doing well with it when they're doing it independently.
Right.
Absolutely. A good measure for success.
Right. Yeah, there's that contrast, struggling to independent. So, yes, that's what you want to see.
And we see a lot of children that have strong, cognitive profiles, but they're not successful at school. And most of the time, there's like a area of weakness with executive functioning. There's skills that they need to be taught that at their age, they're assuming they already have learned and have mastered, but they need to be taught explicitly how to complete the tasks and then how to generalize them in the school setting.
How long does it take someone to make those steps toward independence? Is it a 1-month thing? Is it a 1-year thing? What do you think, Jill?
It definitely depends on the student's profile and exactly what areas of need that they have. It's really important, though, when they come here, we have a lot of good baseline data first, and then we're developing a plan. And then we set goals for the child and for the practitioner that's implementing those goals in the instruction. And then there's progress monitoring that continues to happen to determine, do we need to deviate from the goal? Have they mastered the goal? Are we looking at changing complexity? So really, at time is not something that I could say for sure, besides that it's dependent on the student's profile, the child's profile, and their rate of growth. And then what's the next skill that needs to be mastered? Or maybe they've reached that goal and we get to celebrate and then we start to see some success at school and home.
I appreciate what you're talking about, how individual that is, because when you've met one child who struggles, you've met one child that struggles.
Right.
Yeah. You're so smart about this, you guys. I am just a mom and a pharmacist and a podcaster. How did you learn all this stuff, Jill? What's your educational background?
Sure. So my undergraduate degrees are in elementary and special education. And then after being an intervention specialist and a general education teacher for a few years, I went back to school for my master's degree in leadership and supervision. And then I've had the opportunity to have leadership positions in a few area school districts, and then moved on to complete my doctorate program in education and specialized in special education.
Much respect. That is a lot of training.
Thank you.
Yes. No wonder you know all this stuff. And then, Chelsea, what's your educational background?
So, my bachelor's degree is in psychology and family studies. And after that, I went to graduate school and got my master's in education and then my education specialist degree. For about 15 years after that, I've been practicing as a school psychologist in private and public schools.
Thank you for sharing your background. How did this happen that you formed this Kaizen Educational Group? It's here in Perrysburg. Did it exist before you started it here in Perrysburg?
No,
It
didn't
was
exist.
born in Perrysburg, huh?
That's right. Yeah. So Chelsea and I would often have conversations together about things that we thought that families needed, or things that we felt like families were reaching out to us separately about concerns or wanting help in, or we would see some private evaluations from other providers that we thought really just needed to be more robust and thorough in supporting families. And we still laugh because we felt like then we were celebrating a problem. We would just talk about it and complain about it. And finally it came to the point where like we need to do something about it. We feel like we could give back and support our community in Northwest Ohio. And so we started Kaizen with that in mind of supporting families and children and building strong partnerships with local school districts.
What I hear you saying is a little bit of frustration, but also seeing a gap.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
that's how a lot of businesses are born.
Yeah.
But thank you for talking about the genesis of Kaizen Educational Group. Anything to add, Chelsea?
The best part about it, though, is that as Jill said, we have experts coming together, and not only is it a support for the community and our families, but it's really taking all of our strengths to find those strengths within individual children too. And that's pretty special.
Good for you knowing your strengths and what you can do. Some people focus on what their deficits are and trying to remedy those instead of surrounding themselves with people who can help accommodate for things that they're not strong at. So good for you guys. You're helping make Perrysburg stronger. Perrysburg learners stronger too. Chelsea, if a parent is listening to this right now and thinking, this might be my child that needs some help, what does the process look like from first contact with Kaizen Educational Group to final recommendations?
We encourage parents or guardians to reach out for a complimentary 15-minute phone consultation. It can either be over the phone or a virtual conversation. And that's a time for us to briefly discuss with them their concerns with a member on our team. During that time, we're listening to the family share their observations, we're answering general questions about our services, and determining whether our approach is something that's going to align with what their needs are. If it feels like we may not be the best fit for them, that's okay. Our goal is to be able to still provide support for them and point them in the right direction and make a connection with another agency or another service provider who might better fit their needs. But then for families who do decide to move forward with Kaizen, we will describe the evaluation process in much more detail. And for that evaluation process, what we're starting with is almost like an intake meeting. It's 1 hour long where we're spending time with the parents talking about their child's development. We're asking a ton of questions about their child's strengths, their profile, areas of need that they might have identified. It's really an opportunity for us to be as thorough as possible in understanding their history, and what direction they're hoping to take or what goals they have to come out of an evaluation. From there, we'll also talk about any school experiences that they've had, any sort of social interactions, previous evaluations, or supports they've had, just to make sure we have a very well rounded understanding of their child. The important part of that is that we're then developing a very personalized and tailored evaluation plan for them. And so we're setting up 3 different testing sessions after that with the child that are about 2 hours in length, to be able to allow for breaks and snacks and time to refocus their energies again. But it's helping us with that initial intake to be able to say which practitioners are going to be needed as part of this evaluation, what assessments are going to be appropriate to give, and be able to make sure that our sessions are as thorough and as focused as possible.
You said 3 2-hour sessions, right?
Yes.
Is that all in the same day?
No, great question. We split those out over a couple of weeks' time. Really depends upon the family's schedule and what works best for them. Some families prefer to come in during the day or in the school day hours. Some prefer after school hours. So we're breaking it up based upon what works best for them.
Thank you for talking about that because some kids that are, 2.5 are still taking naps, and I cannot imagine them sitting for 3 2-hour sessions. All right, back to you, Chelsea.
During those three different assessment sessions, we're involving each of the different practitioners. So, whether it's the occupational therapist, speech language pathologist, psychologist, intervention specialist, that really helps to make sure that we're getting a diverse perspective on the child's strengths, challenges, and learning style overall. The actual assessments, as I said before, are tailored to the child. So typically, we're looking at cognitive abilities, academic skills, social emotional functioning, communication, language, fine motor skills, sensory processing, executive functioning, and behavior. And then we're also gathering information from teachers or any outside professionals that they may be working with through private therapies. And the purpose of that is to really make sure that we're understanding how your child functions in both the home setting, but then also the school or community setting too. After the evaluation is complete, we're scheduling time for all of us, everybody who was involved in that assessment, to sit down and review that results as a team. We typically set aside about an hour and a half for that session. And it's an opportunity not only to go over those results, but also to talk about a few very important things. One being the strength based profile. We're highlighting the concerns, we're highlighting the areas that may be potential weaknesses or challenges for their child, but we're also wanting to make sure that we're capitalizing on that as well. From there, we're giving concrete recommendations. So, whether it's for home based strategies, school based strategies, we want to make sure that parents feel empowered with knowing what's going to work for their child based upon the profile that we've just presented them with. We've also given them guidance on how to build collaborative relationships if they're in a school setting. So, who to reach out to, who to contact, who to best have those conversations with if they need to advocate for their child. We're informing them about state and federal laws. So, IDA, 504, that's really going to protect their child's educational rights. And then we want to emphasize to families too that we continue to be a support system to them. So even after that meeting where we've gone over the evaluation, we encourage them to reach out with any follow up questions after they've had time to process that information. If they were in need of any additional advocacy or just connecting with resources in the future.
Thank you for explaining that. I never went through anything that comprehensive when my son got his autism diagnosis. I believe we had a 60 to 90-minute session with a developmental pediatrician at the University of Michigan, and he actually made an audio tape. And so my next question to you, Chelsea, is about how do you document this so that parents can absorb it? It's a lot to take in to find out that your child has learning differences or maybe an official diagnosis of something. How do you communicate that information?
When we sit down with families, they're given a folder that includes not only a copy of their evaluation and some recommendations going forward, but we like to view it as a collaborative conversation. We're sharing the information, but also talking through it, making sure that parents are able to contribute or indicate things that, oh, yeah, we've noticed that too, and also feel comfortable asking questions as we're going through the process. They get the hard copy of the report, and we also send them a digital copy of it too. But we always leave each meeting saying, please reach out as you've had time to process it and as you've had time to digest the information. And if any questions come up, feel free to give us a call and let us know.
I'm glad that you give a written copy. I remember the day that my son got his diagnosis. I had this audio cassette because this was back in 2005. And we also had a few pieces of paper that said the diagnosis, which was autism spectrum disorder. And then there was lists of providers in the Toledo area. And one of them was the early intervention folks over at Lucas County DD. So we had that. We had the name of Rehab Dynamics, maybe a couple other speech therapy providers, occupational therapy providers, etc. If I hadn't had that piece of paper, I think I would have had a really hard time processing it. So I really appreciate that you provide some sort of written documentation because everybody absorbs information differently. I wouldn't be surprised if there's parents that take out their voice memos app and say, "May I please record this?" Has anybody ever done that for one of their, children's assessments?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that you've been on a podcast, maybe
Yeah.
maybe putting that out there
Yeah.
might help some other family process that information.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I had a hard time. I understood the words coming out of the pediatrician's mouth. Your child has autism, but I didn't know what that meant to me. I didn't know, what am I supposed to do? Okay, speech, OT. How often? Once a week, once a month, for how many minutes? What's the goal here? What can I expect? I mean, it can be really, really something to get that diagnosis and a piece of paper and not really know what to do with it. So my next question for either one of you, Jill or Chelsea, would be, do you provide next steps like door number 1, door number
Absolutely.
2, door number 3? Jill, let's hear from you.
So our evaluations do include action steps and recommendations that could assist in supports and services at school, as well as private providers, as well as supports that we can offer here at Kaizen. But it also gives information to parents on how they can implement some supports and strategies in their home as well. So walking out of here feeling empowered with, here's what I'm going to do tomorrow, here's what I'm going to do in a week, and here's what I hope to accomplish in a few months. So absolutely. And I think that's where the value is in our evaluations that are different than some that might be done with one practitioner or maybe just have a diagnosis, because really it's wanting parents to feel like they have options, they're more knowledgeable, and they know what to do next.
We were talking about executive function before, and I feel like there's a little bit of a breakdown. Like we all know how to create a plan, figure out the steps, and then execute when we know what we're doing. But when you get a diagnosis for something you didn't even know that your child had, and it now means that you need therapy, maybe occupational therapy for a fine motor delay. Maybe the child has a hard time with handwriting. Well, how often do they need to work on this? How does insurance pay for it? As a parent, there's just a lot of question marks. So I think an educational consultant like you fills in the blanks. And as a parent, I would have appreciated that. I'm not saying that way back in the 2005 they left me hanging, but I feel like there was no clear plan, and you're such a nice alternative. And I am not compensated in any way for doing this podcast interview. Once I found out what Kaizen Educational Group does, I was like, oh, Perrysburg needs to know about this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Anything else that we want to talk about with the process before we move on?
The only thing I would add is the process lasts about 3.5 to 4 weeks. So from that initial phone call to the written report is pretty close to 4 weeks. And when we were developing our business plan and our model of how we were going to be responsive to parents, the time was very important, because the last thing a family wants to do, if they're calling us, it means it's for a reason, that they want to be on a wait list for 4 to 6 months. And so we put a plan in place to make sure that our team was not only available, but we had enough practitioners that were experts in order to make sure that parents weren't waiting. That was really important to us.
Thank you. That's good looking out, too, because even 20 years ago, when I tried to get my son in to see a developmental pediatrician, they said it would be a 6-month wait. And we got lucky because there was a cancellation the day after Labor Day back in 2005, and we took that. And that's how we found out. We went on up there and got that diagnosis. My experience working with a developmental pediatrician is just, one set of eyes, but you've talked about having all these different sets of eyes on somebody when you evaluate them. Can you kind of talk about what's the difference? I mean, is it one better, or what's it like anyways here compared to that?
Sure. Certainly when you are utilizing a specialist in our area, there's absolute value to that. And they have expertise in their scope, and they certainly have a lens of expertise. But what we are able to provide families is the expertise of 4 different practitioners. So, for example, if you are suspecting that maybe your child has autism, we're not just looking at academic or cognitive skills. Most of the time, when you're looking at a child that potentially has autism, there might be some concerns with sensory processing. So, an OT should absolutely be part of that evaluation. Same with a speech language pathologist. There could be areas of deficit in that expressive language or sensory processing. And so when we're looking at having a team of people surrounding a family and surrounding a child, not only are we able to provide a robust amount of information and able to synthesize information from 4 different people, but we're also providing the family with expertise of 4 different people. Instead of going to different places, you go and maybe one place gives you a diagnosis of ADHD. I mean, there's plenty of places you can find that will give you a diagnosis. But if you're really looking for how does that impact other areas, what are the recommendations of these 4 people, that's what makes our practice very unique.
Thank you. And what are the 4 people? You said OT, speech.
Right. And then a psychologist and then an intervention specialist.
Got it. Thank you. And it sounds like you're able to diagnose a disability, a learning disability, with the team that you do have, right? And that was news to me because when we were doing our pre-interview discussion, I thought, oh, well, I thought only a developmental pediatrician could do that or a child psychiatrist. There was only 3 that I knew of that could diagnose, but you're telling me that it is within your scope of practice to apply a diagnosis to a person with learning differences. Is that right?
Absolutely. Everyone here is qualified to complete that diagnostic assessment with the child to look at all the areas we've discussed. Several are board certified as well as certified by the Ohio Department of Education. So our scope can look at the medical side of things, but then we're also aligning it to what does educationally that mean for the child.
And the medical community honors your diagnosis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. I feel like having more options is just better for families. Yeah. And it seems like you have more of an educational lens, education background, whereas they're more on the medical side. And I can tell you, as a parent of a now adult with autism, that it seems like there's always been this push and pull between medicine and education. One wants to claim the disability as, they can diagnose it, and then education wants to claim it too. It sounds like you're collaborating now, which is really nice to see because families have those long waits sometimes. Yeah, that can be so frustrating. We just talked about how some families have historically had to wait. Now, when it comes to the Perrysburg community specifically, do you have competition that does what you do?
Yeah, in terms of competition, I think we're looking at single practitioners. Parents can take their child to the pediatrician, or they may be working with a counselor, or they may be working with an academic tutor. And that individual absolutely has value. They have a lot of insights and can offer support, but sometimes that scope is very narrow. And sometimes that tends to be limited to their expertise. And so, in contrast, here, we're bringing together that team and we're each having the unique knowledge and expertise within our individual fields, but it becomes a far more comprehensive and holistic understanding of the child. I think that we're filling a critical gap too between the clinical or medical worlds and the educational worlds because not only are we providing an answer, here's what's happening, but then also what's the practical guidance that we've tailored for their child. In terms of other differences, though, we're giving a very detailed learning profile. It's not just here's the diagnosis, but this is how they learn. This is cognitively what their profile looks like. This is how it's impactful within an educational or a home setting. We're looking at social, emotional, behavior, adaptive, executive functioning, sensory, communication, all of the different areas that we've talked about. But then also, how does that impact your school performance? How does that impact what it's like out in the community or within your home setting? We're also celebrating and understanding what those differences mean for children. There are a lot of strengths and a lot of gifts that come with different diagnoses. And so we want to be able to capitalize on those differences as well and celebrate the wins that families have. There are a lot of ways that we're naturally looking at how a child thinks or solves problems or interacts with the world. And we're trying to help uncover what makes them feel most secure, what makes them feel most regulated, and what makes them be able to problem solve and be able to interact on a day to day.
By having everything under one roof, you're able to collaborate. So I feel like there is no competitor, business wise. Nobody else in Perrysburg does this. Yeah. So how'd you get the idea to do this if, this didn't exist before?
We had heard from families that they were on wait lists or they couldn't find a private provider in the area that could meet their needs, or that they didn't know what to do next. And so we felt like we could answer those questions and we could provide a service for those families that were looking for support. I think we mentioned it earlier, is that while we may not be the right fit for everyone in our community, we certainly can help them to find the right one. And felt like when we were initially starting our business, there were just a lot of people that were looking for support or looking for someone to answer questions or a referral or a way to collaborate with multiple providers, and thought we can do that for them.
It sounds like when you were trying to identify the gaps that you wanted to fill, you felt like having the educator, the school psychologist type
Mhm.
person, the speech therapist, and the OT seemed like the dream team.
Mhm.
That's kind of what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, again, I really appreciate what you do because I think it would have been a completely different scenario for us if we hadn't had to piece it together individually. It reminds me of when you buy your car, but then you go get it serviced at Jiffy Lube off campus from where you bought your car. And then you find the tires on sales at Costco. And then you go there. It's like piecing something together. And it really is nice when you can do it all under one roof and you get to know the mechanic and
Right.
there's that
Mhm.
continuity. I'm sorry, I don't mean to compare children to cars, but I think that's a real life example. We all know the pain of, going here and there, and you got to remember where's the rewards program that I'm in and where do I get the free tire rotation. But if you come to someplace like Kaizen, then it's all under one roof and you get that continuity and collaboration.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about the learning differences and the diagnoses that you support most often, but can you tell me a little bit about how you help those individuals?
We have an amazing team here. Our mental health counselors, our psychologists certainly help with executive functioning, that emotional regulation piece. We have speech and language pathologists that help to strengthen the expressive receptive skills and the social skills, that pragmatic piece. We have tutors and intervention specialists that help students with weaknesses in academic skills. Like, for example, if a child is dyslexic, is really understanding their profile and then providing them with instruction using a structured literacy program that follows a scope and sequence. Really, we've got a team here that can be very responsive to the areas of need while celebrating their strengths.
Anything to add? Maybe about IEP meetings, or if anybody doesn't know what a 504 plan is, how can you help a family that's going through the school system and they just need some support with that?
Yeah, that is one of the things that we can offer is advocacy support. It is just a world that families will say, like, I'm just not an expert in, or I really don't know what to ask, or I feel like there's so much information that's shared at meetings, and our team can definitely help with that. Parents are experts in their children, and that's an important value that they bring to a school team meeting. But sometimes they need help with asking the right questions and understanding the documents that are being presented and shared. And so, what we like to do with families is we always offer that complimentary phone call. And sometimes we can certainly answer those questions and give families action steps to move forward, or we will have them come in if they need a little bit more service and support. We go through documents with them. So we would take a look at the current IEP, the evaluation team report, or Section 504 document, and we go through and look at everything, talk to the family about their concerns or what they're just not feeling good about. The idea is when we attend meetings with families, it is not intended to be adversarial in any way. The idea is for us to help bridge understanding between the school team and the family, to help ask some questions. We make sure that the families understand the plans. So we go through each section of an IEP so they really understand the relevance of it. We make sure that they have an understanding of questions that will need to be asked, what the outcomes mean. Our job is to help empower parents and then to make sure a child receives the supports and services that they're entitled to.
Well said. For any parent who's just starting off with their child in the school system, just from my own experience, I felt like the IEP process was really intimidating.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what the vision statement was or how to write it or what my part in writing one was. I didn't know if it needed to be a collaborative thing with the school teacher or if it needed to just be my husband and me making something up, or we didn't know. And until we had done it repeatedly, I feel like we didn't catch on. To have an advocate at the very beginning would be very helpful. So I appreciate that you offer that advocacy and support. For anybody that doesn't know what an IEP or a 504 plan are, could you please explain those?
Yeah, so an IEP is a legal document that is written in collaboration with the school district when a child qualifies for special education services. And the idea is that document is developed in order for a child to improve areas of weakness, gain skills, move closer to grade level, and bridge any gaps. Those are written at least once a year with the family in order to ensure that a child receives the correct services they need. A 504 plan it's called a Section 504 plan. It's a different law that originated in the workplace, but again, it's a legal document that the school district drafts in collaboration with parents to ensure that families have a voice in their child's education and making sure that they receive supports as well.
Lingo can be intimidating. Back in the day, I didn't even know what IEP stood for. It used to be Individualized Education Plan, but Jill has told me today that it now has a new meaning. What is it, Jill? It's Individualized
Education program.
Program.
Right,
Yeah, so
right.
instead of plan, it's now program.
Right. It's just not a document. It's the idea that it's a supportive program to meet the child's needs.
Fine by me. Now that my kids are both out of school, I can't keep up. But anybody listening to this who has heard about an IEP might appreciate knowing what it
Yeah.
stands for.
Oh,
So
right.
thank you for
right.
explaining that. Yeah. Acronyms, so much fun, right?
And that's what happens at meetings too with families, and they don't know what things stand for or what things mean. And so it's important that they have support.
What advice would you give a first-time IEP attendee, like a parent, about all these terms, acronyms, etc.? What advice would you give them, Jill?
That's a good question, Kim. I would say to make sure that they empower themselves with questions prior to the IEP meeting, that they have a draft that they can go over and mark and ask questions. It's important that they go into that meeting feeling and knowing that they are just as much an important member of that IEP team than anyone else sitting there. The law says that their input should be just as substantial as any school team member. And they have to remember they're, again, an expert in their child, and that brings so much value. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not understand, but to not sit quietly is really important. And they can always contact us if they have questions. We're happy to answer questions and kind of send them on their way too.
One of the things that I would highly recommend for parents is that they definitely get a draft, probably a week ahead of time, mark it up with a red marker or something like that, and then ask a lot of questions during the IEP meeting. I have had some trouble at IEP meetings early on when my son was very young. I didn't understand what an ETR was, or that he had already had one and I didn't realize it. There's all kinds of things. The evaluation team report is the ETR. So if you don't understand the acronyms, ask. And definitely look ahead of time, write your comments on there, and feel free to give them to the teacher or the school district in advance so they know what you're going to ask and they have an opportunity to think about it and formulate a response. So just from me to you, those are my recommendations. Chelsea, anything to add?
I would just add to that never forget that you are your child's biggest advocate and you have your child's best interests in heart. And it's okay to question things or ask about something or to get clarification on something. And that's how you're going to see the best growth for your child.
Everybody's trying to help the child, definitely. And it's more of a collaboration. Jill talked earlier about how nobody's going in there trying to be adversarial. It's a collaboration. It's not you versus the school district. It's everybody working together to help your child. Yep. So go in with the right attitude, right? Mindset's a very important piece. All right. Thank you very much, ladies. Let's move on to the next topic. Chelsea, stories of transformation are powerful. When someone goes from struggling to successful, everybody celebrates. Can you share a story about a family who came to you? They were concerned about their child's learning differences or lack of age-appropriate skills, and you helped them.
Absolutely. We've been very fortunate to work with several families who have been proactive and involved in making sure that their child gets what they need. But one family in particular comes to mind when I think about their daughter who was involved in some private therapies, and parents started to notice that they weren't quite showing the progress that would be expected given the time and the intensity of it. The school had started to share some challenges as well. It was especially related to emotional regulation and sensory sensitivities. And parents started to worry, what was that next grade level transition going to look like for her? They had started to notice changes, especially whenever there was any sort of academic or a social demand was put on her. And they really wanted to find a deeper understanding of what their child's profile looked like. At the time, they didn't have any diagnoses. And so they had questioned maybe it was autism, maybe ADHD, maybe anxiety. And so that was our starting point with the family. The evaluation process was comprehensive in terms of looking at her developmental profile. We did a lot of direct observations and some standardized testing, targeting all the different areas that were of concern. And we were fortunate enough to also be able to collaborate with the school teachers and the team there, as well as with the private therapists that she was seeing. What we found through completing that evaluation is a very strong cognitive profile. We were happy to share a lot of strengths with academic skills, with her receptive language, but those difficulties with emotional regulation, sensory processing, and even articulation really stood out to us. And not only was that impacting her home life, but it was impacting school life too, and what that meant for her making friends and being around her peers day to day. At the end of that, I remember parents looking to us and saying, okay, what next? Where would you put your energies in this? And we had shared that working with the occupational therapist would really give the biggest return in terms of working on the emotional regulation piece and the sensory processing. And so she's was a client of one of our occupational therapists for a few months. She started to really reach her goals in those areas to the point where there was even a reduction in services. Parents also worked with us for advocacy support too, making sure that their evaluation that was next due by the school included all of the different areas that really would give a holistic profile of their child. And then they also utilize those advocacy services and development of the IEP, making sure that everything was addressed within the school setting too and provided a strength based profile for her. I'm happy to say that, again, she's been discontinued from a lot of those services and has made some really great gains through their own work as a family and then time spent here and time spent at the school for those services. And even beyond that, we've developed a good relationship with the family to where if they have questions or they're not sure what to do next or they're reaching maybe support in a different way, there's ongoing communication with all of us and collaboration between our therapists and the family to make sure that they continue on that positive track.
You have me curious. Did this individual happen to get a diagnosis? Did the diagnosis lead to services? Can you share any of that?
The diagnosis did end up being autism. It was difficult for the family to process and to hear, even though they had some inclination that a lot of the characteristics were there developmentally for her. But it did open up meaning for them. It did give them direction. It did enlighten the school-based team too as to what services were going to be most appropriate for her.
Thank you for sharing that. I think any parent who is leery of getting a diagnosis because they're afraid of being put into a box needs to hear what you just said. Because of a diagnosis, it led to services and progress.
Mhm.
That's very important. Thank you for sharing that success story. Any other stories you would like to share?
I feel like every day there's something to celebrate here. Whether it's just a phone call that somebody made to us and we're able to answer it, or we're able to make a referral to another practice, is worth celebrating. We have had the joy of getting to know a lot of families within the area and some actually outside the area. We have some traveling next week 4 hours. So we're starting to expand to families that we're able to support. But we've really had a nice opportunity to support children and families here and get to know them. Again, what Chelsea was saying, it's not just one meeting and here's a report and we're done. It's that you've got access to everybody here in terms of support and always available here to answer questions. So lots of great things to celebrate, a lot of good stories in just the time that we've been here.
I have a question for both of you. Maybe I'll go to Chelsea first here. Do you ever feel like families, when they find out their children have a learning difference, they like the label because it gives them something to Google or ask ChatGPT about, or find a book about, or a community of support to join? Chelsea, what experiences have you had with labels?
I think a lot of families find meaning in giving that label. They've noticed certain things or they've looked at different characteristics and maybe they've done their own Google search, but finally having that is almost a missing piece for them of, okay, now I get it. And now this is all making sense for me. I think that it does open up other services, as we've said before. It does help us pinpoint what's going to be the best avenue to support the child, what's going to be the best strategies to use, what research is behind the support that we can provide for their child. And that's really empowering for parents to finally have that label, if you will, to know what next steps to take. They might be questioning a lot. And so this really helps guide where their next step should be.
Thank you for talking about that. And just as a parent of a child with autism, it helped me find support among families who were experiencing similar situations, sensory issues, or we could exchange ideas. And it helped me as a parent. So I know it's about the child getting the support they need and making progress. But as a parent, I felt like it really helped me quite a bit as well.
And would you say that in Perrysburg, there's a lot of families that are supporting each other, and there's a lot of private groups. And I think there's natural ways that parents can connect with other families that have children with similar profiles too. And I think that's empowering to know that you're not alone and that you have a community of people that are supporting you as well.
I like that you brought that into a very Perrysburg specific comment. Yes, there are Facebook groups. And then, of course, we moms in the carpool line, we all meet, and we get to know each other. And then as our children have become adults, it's very interesting. Some people go to an ADS program, an adult day service program. Some folks have chosen to work. And it's just kind of interesting to keep in touch. My son now has an Instagram account, which he needs my help and support to access. But people can follow him. What's he up to now that he's graduated? There's some really interesting, beautiful things that have happened because we have this support system and we keep in touch. So I would recommend, if you feel leery of getting a label or a diagnosis, think of the positive things. There's a lot of really good things that have happened in my life because my son has a diagnosis. Jill, I think your business started in 2025. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what's your business goal for 2026 or any goals for helping students in 2026?
We definitely want to continue to be a resource to our community. We want to be able to answer questions for families, guide them. We want to make sure that we can match services to the needs of the child. We feel really grateful that we're able to do that every day, but we definitely want to continue that through 2026. We want parents to know that we're always going to be a resource for them here, regardless if we can't specifically provide the services that their child needs. We want to be able to help them and find the services that they need. Long term, I think it would be great if we had a second location. We have families traveling, and so I think an expansion plan could be on the horizon.
Speaking of traveling, I think you said just a few minutes ago that you have a trip planned 4 hours away. You're taking your team 4 hours away?
The family is traveling to us. It's common for us to do observations with school districts, though, so we do travel, but this family's making the trip.
Okay. Boy, I thought I was making a long trip when I went from Toledo to Ann Arbor, but 4 hours. Wow. Worth the drive.
Yeah, there you go.
Perrysburg's worth the drive.
Yeah.
Awesome. I like how you said you want to be a resource here in 2026 for Perrysburg and Northwest Ohio. So that's a really great goal. Now, as far as summer stuff, we're already in March. It's March 23rd as we record this. Do you have any summer camps coming up? That was huge for my son when he was growing up. He would always go to Rehab Dynamics or Capable Kids. So what do you guys have on tap for summer 2026?
Yeah, quite a few summer intervention programs lined up. We're really excited about it. Our intention is that we continue with a positive trend of growth for children and that we avoid that summer slide. So our intervention focus is going to be on some academic tutoring. So with our teachers or intervention specialists who are on staff, we have executive functioning with one of our psychologists. We're going to be doing emotional regulation, fine motor, and sensory processing with our occupational therapists. And then communication and social skills with one of our speech and language pathologists. Our mental health professional has time this summer as well. She's going to be working on emotional regulation techniques, resilience, mindfulness, self-advocacy, problem-solving skills. So quite a few things coming up this summer.
I've got to ask, as a parent of a child that just went through Perrysburg schools, does the Perrysburg schools allow their extended school year students to use Kaizen as a ESY program?
We have notified all of the area school districts, their directors of special education, of student services, that we can certainly support them as they make sure they're in compliance with extended school year programs.
Okay, so it sounds like you're offering. Now
Yep.
it's just up to the schools to
Yeah, if they
decide
need
if
us,
they're
sure.
going to
Yeah.
send their students to you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what an exciting first summer, right?
Yeah.
Is this your first summer?
Yes,
You got it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, how exciting. Summer camps used to be fun. I mean, for the sensory type stuff, I remember my son used to get to play with stuff outside, bubbles and shaving cream and I don't know, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I know you're not the OTs, but I bet the OTs have some fun stuff planned.
They always have something fun
Yeah.
planned every single session, but I think that they'll love spending time out in that field out there too for some outdoor time.
You do have a nice patch of grass for some outdoor activities, so hopefully you guys will have a fun first year. Do you anticipate having a limited number of spaces available?
All of our practitioners are working this summer. However, just the time of day may be limited if a family has a preference on whether it's morning or evening or a day of the week. So we have people that have already committed to summer, and so just the time of day would maybe limit availability.
How would somebody sign up for your summer programs, and do they need an evaluation first? I know you talked about the 4-member evaluation team.
You do not need to have an evaluation completed. No diagnosis is needed. To sign up, they can either call the office or complete the inquiry on our website or send us an email.
That sounds easy enough. I will put a link to your website in the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com. Jill, anything to add about summer camps or all the fun? Will you be working with the summer campers?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Wouldn't miss out.
Very good. And is it a 6-week term, 8 weeks, or what do you have planned?
It's really dependent on the family's needs. We want to be flexible. We understand that families have commitments and potential travel planned, and so we can certainly work around that. We have availability starting then in June and working through August when they transition back to school.
Okay. As we start to wrap this up, I'd like to ask some kind of miscellaneous questions. Chelsea, do you currently have a waiting list for anything at all?
There's not currently a wait list for any of our services. If we're looking at completing a psychoeducational evaluation, it really depends upon parent and child scheduling and depending upon their availability when we can quickly get them in.
Okay. But in general, no 6-month wait at all?
No.
Okay, that's very good to hear. All right. And how can families get started working with you here at Kaizen Educational Group?
They can either give us a phone call, they can email us at our info email, or visit the website. There is a contact us tab where they can fill out a quick form and we'll be in touch with them.
Sounds easy enough. Do you have social media they can check out so they can see your smiling faces or this beautiful corner of land that you've got here almost on a cul-de-sac on Commerce Drive?
We do. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Kaizen_educational_group.
Thank you very much. I'll put links to those in the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com. Now, Jill, I need some practical advice as we wrap this up. What would you say to a parent who's worried but unsure whether their concerns are valid? We parents, we second guess ourselves.
That's not uncommon for a parent to call or to share that maybe they feel like they're overthinking or that they are comparing their child to others, but they need to trust those feelings. And what that tells us is that there's some more information that's needed. And so being able to complete an evaluation to determine their child's profile, their strengths, and potentially areas of need. But ultimately, that trusting themselves, knowing that there might be something there that they need answers for, and we can certainly help with that.
It reminds me of that classic phrase, if you see something, say something. If you have concerns, say something, reach out. All right. And then for either one of you, if a parent's listening right now and they feel overwhelmed, what's a message of hope you'd like them to hear from you?
Our primary takeaway from all of this and from having Kaizen is that we have a very deep commitment to supporting our community by serving with comprehensive resources for families, children, and local school districts. We want to be that liaison. We want to bridge the gap to any sort of outside services and foster a reliable network for families. We want to be able to give them connection and ongoing support to ensure that they have the support system they need in order to thrive.
You're going to fill gaps and offer support. That's what I hear.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Way to go. Jill, anything to add to that? Any messages of hope you'd like to share with parents that may be hearing this?
I would just say that please reach out. We're happy to have a phone conversation or a virtual meeting and answer questions. I think families assume that there's some type of maybe commitment or that there's like a financial cost to that, and there's absolutely not. Like we can certainly answer questions, provide them action steps, and get them headed in the right direction.
Thank you very much for that message of hope. Thank you so much for being here on the Perrysburg podcast. Take care and have a great summer.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jill and Chelsea for being on the show today. I think they have a very helpful private practice right here in Perrysburg. If you or a family you know needs their help, please reach out to Kaizen Educational Group. Their website, contact information, and social media links are in the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com. Thank you for listening to episode 141 of the Perrysburg Podcast. It is now April, and April is Autism Acceptance Month. Hats off to the village of people who helped my husband and me raise our son, Craig. We really appreciate all of you, and thank you to all of the educators and therapists, all the consultants who care for, understand, and support individuals on the autism spectrum all over this planet. If you know someone who would like today's episode or needs to hear it, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, come on back. We have a lot more coming up in 2026. Subscribe to or follow the Perrysburg podcast on your favorite podcast player and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Thanks so much for listening today. I'll talk to you next week.